Welcome to Minnesota Legislative Report, our region's longest-running public affairs program. Lawmakers from northeastern Minnesota are joining us today for a recap of the week's activities at the state capitol. This is your opportunity to call or email your legislative questions and have them answered live on the air. Minnesota Legislative Report starts now.
Hello and welcome to Minnesota Legislative Report. I'm your host, Tony Sertich. With just 2 weeks to the end of the 2023 legislative session, conference committee members are working out the details of the major budget bills. Legislators are putting in long hours, and many have stayed in St. Paul over the weekend as committee conferees can be called to meetings on short notice. Viewers have an opportunity today to get the latest update on these major bills and others that you have questions about to the lawmakers who represent you. To ask a question, dial the number on your screen or email questions to ask@pbsnorth.org. We're very happy to welcome two lawmakers who took time from their hectic final weeks to join us in the studio. Representative Roger Skraba is a Republican from Ely, representing House District 3A. Welcome, Representative Skraba.
Good evening.
And Representative Nathan Nelson is a Republican from Hinckley, representing House District 11B. Welcome, Representative Nelson. Great to have you both back here.
Well, thank you. It's good to be here.
Alrighty. Yep. So we're in the season, and I don't want to sound too much like Schoolhouse Rock here, but I think it'd be good for the viewers. We're in the season where the House representatives, and you both are members of the House, and the Senate have passed versions of all of these bills dealing with all the budget areas, and there are differences in them. And so they go to what they call a conference committee, where they pick 5 members of each body, generally most of the majority members, to iron out the differences. And so that's the point we're at with a whole bunch of the bills. What's it like down at the Capitol these days when that's the major push now, is these conference committees of 10 legislators of the 201 are working on the details, Representative Nelson?
It's a little bit of hurry up and wait. Conference committees, there's not as much notice as a normal committee meeting. Quite often they're planned to meet every day, but that doesn't mean that it'll be scheduled for each day of the week. And usually anytime there's an agreement by the chairs of the committee, usually there'll be a committee called within a few hours, and some things passed. And it may be a thing of a committee may recess for a couple of hours and come back later. So it does give a lot of time of just kind of idleness for those that aren't on conference committees, and so it can be different.
Sure. Representative Skraba, it's your first time doing this, a little different than City Hall up in Ely.
Oh, yeah.
So generally what happens is the House will come in and put an offer out to the Senate, and then they'll go think about it and come back and forth. And I know you've sat in on a few hearings thus far. What's your take as a first-term legislator watching this process?
When you were talking about, 5 senators and 5 House, like environment doesn't have any Republicans on. It's all Democrats. Mm-hmm. And usually they give one just to sit and watch. And so some of these committees don't have any of our representation. So, I don't know what we could do anyway because we're in the minority. But what I've seen so far is like you hear from the people outside the room, they're talking about this, they're talking about that. And then from my standpoint, I'm again, sitting back, just watching what's going on, trying to comprehend, what's next, what's our next role, how do we fit in, where do we go? And I keep diverting back to what Senator Bach told me. He came to my office one day this session and just said, embrace it, learn what you can now because you're in the minority, and you are really in the minority. Just understand it. You actually have time off because you're not doing all the work. You're just waiting what's coming back. So I'm absorbing as much as I can, There's seems like a lot of downtime, but there really isn't, because someone's always wanting to talk to you.
Sure. And so once the House and the Senate, this conference committee gets agreement between themselves, the bill goes back to the floor, and then you all vote on the final version. There can be no amendments. You can just vote yes or no, and then if it passes, it goes on to the governor for signature. So a couple of quick questions. Representative Nelson, you sit on the Ag Committee. That's generally been the most bipartisan bill, easiest to manage. There's not a lot of budget there as far as this overall state budget. Do you have a sense of kind of the overall highlights of where you see that going?
I think there's a pretty good global agreement with the Ag bill. Broadband is funded through that, and I think it's an area that it's easy to see the need. And I think both sides, a very bipartisan issue on funding broadband, making sure that gets funded in the ways that it needs. There's always be nice to have more money at it, but we'll take what we can get. I think it's about 127 million that's going to broadband. There's a few little areas I think that are kind of holding up the final agreement between the House and Senate versions, but overall the shape of the bill is really close. If it's not completed, I don't know if the chairs, I know they met yesterday. I don't know if they had maybe had some played a little phone tag today, I suppose. But as we're coming into the final days here, a lot of things that happen, fairly quickly, oftentimes.
Yep. And the other big piece of legislation, the last bill that's traditionally passed, is the tax bill, because almost everything is related to taxes in one way, shape, or form, and that's where some final agreements gets done. We talked about this 2 weeks ago when both of you were here, and our viewers are always asking about the Social Security tax and the state taxing that. It looks to be now that the agreement is roughly, it'll be covered for 75% roughly of Minnesotans. Is that your sense of it, or take Representative Skraba, and what do you think about that?
That is the sense of it. There sounds like there'll be some negotiation on it. It's the irony to the comment, the tax bills always last, the bonding bills always last.
That's true.
and right now we have a bonding and a tax bill, which is unusual. It's not normal, but it's what's going to happen here is the bonding bill is waiting to see what the tax bill does. So if the tax bill goes through the way it could, then there'll be some movement from the bonding, and then they'll move real close, fast, boom, boom, in and out. But the Social Security tax, again, I go back to the district, and the folks kept saying this week again, you need to make that higher. You got to get that number up higher. There's a lot of us that make more than $78,000, I think is what it is.
So individuals making $78,000 and couples making $100,000.
Right.
Everything below that will be no tax.
Right, and some of them, and it was kind of interesting coming down today listening to who's in the military. Most people joining the military never saw 9/11. It's kind of like, wow, so they have no idea. Same thing with Social Security. Most of the people that are retiring now, only one spouse worked, or I should say, take that back, two spouses were working during the whole time, so that number is way small for what it should be for these married couples. And I keep getting pushback from them, and these are traditional Democrats. They're saying, can't you do better, can't you do better? And I think it's a good starting point. I think where we are is where, if that's where we're going to communicate at, that's good. But ideally, that number would be higher, that's all.
Any thoughts on the Social Security tax?
Yeah, I think, there's a almost $18 billion surplus. I know some of it is one-time money, but I think at the same time, right now the tax that's collected off of the Social Security, it's around $1 billion, if I remember right. I think that there's areas that we can balance our budget without that tax, and I think we can work around it. And exempting tax it would only be on the Social Security portion of that income. And that's already been collected one time as a tax. I don't think we need to do it a second time. And I really think that we're missing it when we could have. And I think most people campaigned on repealing it completely as well.
And for the viewers' information, the field's locked in. Roughly 76% of folks will see that elimination, and the others will not. So we will move on to our first question here from a viewer today. Thomas writes in, and Representative Skraba, you might know this. What is the status of the proposal for legislation to eliminate using lead to make fishing tackle or jigs of 1 ounce or less?
That was starting through, I can't remember if that was eliminated in the negotiation. When I looked at, they have a list of what's been talked about.
So it's under consideration right now.
Yes.
And we're unsure of the status.
But
it's
right,
somewhere.
and the Senate and the House conferees are meeting, and there was some stuff they've already agreed to, and I can't remember if I saw something about that or not. I don't know what the status is. don't think if I'd be wrong, because it part of it was the Swan. What pushed it was the Swans. Representative Hansen wanted to protect the Swans, and I think the lead ban is still in the 7 metro area. I want to say, but my memory's not that. There's so much information going around right now, but
it's probably safe to say it's not resolved yet, but it's definitely being discussed right now.
Yes, absolutely. I would have, if it was totally out, I think I would have remembered it being totally out, but I don't think, I think it's being discussed still. So.
Okay. Next viewer, and Representative Nelson, will start with you, wants to talk about the capital investment or bonding bill. And so as a reminder to viewers, this is a bill that generally happens every other year where the state borrows resources to invest in public infrastructure, buildings, colleges, roads, bridges, those sorts of projects that have regional or statewide significance. Last year, the bill did not get completed, and so this year it's been on the table. Representative Skraba, you sit on the Capital Investment Committee. There's a proposal right now for a rather significant bill. And right now, the Senate Republicans have said we don't want to support this bill until we see a total elimination of the Social Security tax. We saw that that's not going to happen, and they've since walked back that position a little bit. And so they've been somewhat tied together, and the viewers wondering about the status of this bill. And I guess there's 2 tracks to go down, right? Is this bill could be presented at the end of session and see if there's bipartisan support. And there needs to be, because you need a super majority to pass a bill that does borrowing of resources. Or what's been discussed by some Democrats is using some of that one-time cash money that Representative Nelson was talking about to just pass that bill, which would probably eliminate some or all of the Republican projects, because what they're saying is some Republicans are tying the 2 bills together. And so, Representative Nelson, what's the status of this? What are your hopes about a final capital investment bill?
I think my hopes is that there can be a capital investment, bonding bill that passes before the end of session. And I know that the Senate has walked back their position a little bit, but yet at the same time, there are some other provisions that they're kind of holding on. And like a true game of poker, they're not really showing their cards, but at the same time, they are saying they want a few things. So it is, the House did pass out a bill, and the Senate is holding that currently. So they could pass that and send it back to the House with the changes, or I don't know if Representative Skraba has any other ideas what is happening with the bonding bill in the House side, but there's lots can happen in 2 weeks here. I think we close or end of sessions 2 weeks from tomorrow, I believe, and so a lot can happen in 14 days. So.
And Representative Skraba, as you said, this is generally a last bill out the door, so we won't know a final answer on this, but what's the lay of the land from your perspective?
From what I'm seeing, it's interesting how you said that the Republicans won't get anything, and actually some Republicans will get some, and some. But what the Democrats would end up doing is going to a cash bill, and then they don't need super majority. They would just have a simple majority, and they have that as it is. And that would cut into their $17.6 billion the way they're trying to allocate it.
They would take a portion of the surplus and dedicate it towards
and
capital
the
projects.
the governor was real clear. He didn't want to do that. He said, no, I really don't want to use cash, but if you're going to make me, I will. And it was like, okay, so there's hope that there's going to be some movement. Before we left on Thursday evening, I think I left Thursday afternoon, there was some movement in the bonding. There were some numbers being tossed around, thrown around. So any movement right now on the capital investments bill is good. So they're talking.
Safe to say, though, we will not have a final answer on this, most likely until that last weekend.
I would say yes. Again, there are, and I'm a representative, I'm not supposed to do rumors, but there is talk about another bonding bill right behind it. But I don't think we're set for that. Chair Lee Fooley he hasn't notified us to have another meeting yet. We've been hearing, up until about a week ago, we were hearing for more projects, but those will be on for next year now.
Thank you. So caller from Hibbing is wondering if he should be contacting lawmakers besides his own representatives to ask them to eliminate the state tax on Social Security. Is there a way to contact all representatives as a group, or do you reach out to them individually? And so we can talk about what do you think the chances are, if this caller from Hibbing were to reach out to other legislators from other districts other than their own, how do you think that would be received? Is that a good use of that person's time?
I have 685 unanswered emails right now. You know, you want to keep bringing more, go ahead. I try to get just my constituents first, and then I go back and get the rest. I think this issue is, it's down to a couple of senators, because, I mean, basically it came out of the House, and the House is, you know, happy with what it sent. I think the Senate is the place to put your energy, you know, and find out where your representative, but that's where it's at right now, the Senate.
Impact of folks from outside your district trying to influence your vote.
You know, I think in areas like Social Security, things like this, I think it's important to be able to voice your opinion. I think your senator and your representative are the ones, you know, that are going to be most responsive. For myself, and probably most others, if they get an email from somebody outside of the district, it may just kind of go as a tally mark that all right, this one, you know, this individual's in favor or opposed to something, but it's most people are really representing their district. We do serve the whole state, so it is important there. But the next area I would say, if you do want to contact somebody, would be the committee chairs. You know, so on the tax committee, you know, sending an email to the chair, to your representative, and probably to your senator, and saying, you know, the House and Senate, both of them, contacting committee chairs, because I think that's the important. And then also, like the speaker and minority leaders, I think, you know, they're individuals that they, you know, probably don't read every email that comes in that's not from their constituent. At the same time, it's something that, you know, they're looking at, you know, where the wind's blowing, what is the feel from the you know, from Minnesota, from, you know, those that we represent.
Okay. And then I think procedurally, to finish off the question here, there's no way to blanket just blast out a message to all legislators. You have to go one by one to contact legislators. Is that correct?
I don't know. I've gotten some emails where say to all legislators, you know, like it says.
But there's nowhere on, like on the website, to say hit one button and send to everybody. You have to go to every individual, and that's the question.
I think there's like different names like Vote So they have access to the program that gets to all legislators. Yeah. So we all get a copy of your issue. And again, like I think like Representative Nelson said, we look at them and tally them and use them. I mean, it's like, because where's the trend going? What's happening? And I think that's important to let leadership know what's going on. What's the feel of most people? I don't think there's, I'm trying to figure out what else you can talk about for Social Security. I mean, it's a pretty wore out issue right now. So any legislator that doesn't think it has to go this way, they're going to have to defend themselves. So that's where we're going.
All right. Well, thanks to that viewer in Hibbing for the question. Keep those questions coming in. A question we get from time to time on the show is about PolyMet, and actually it's now called New Range Copper and Nickel LLC. Representative Skraba, that's up near your neck of the woods. I guess the questions we get go all around the issues. So I guess the way I'd pose a more general question is, at this point in time, with New Range having its permits and some of the permits being challenged in court, is there anything the legislature can do at this point to impact the project one way or another, or is it in the courts and that's where it's at right now?
It's in the courts, because I mean, we meet with different people at different times, you know, mining company, iron ore mining, both, all the above. And the minute that legislators go in and try to tweak laws to show favoritism, it doesn't sell good, and it really doesn't look good. The rules are in place. Everybody abided by the rules. They went in, they got everything done with what they did, and now people are suing, saying that wasn't enough, you need to do more. If we go in and say, well, we can help you, we'll rewrite the law, did we? Did we help them? You know, and it's like, no, just let it go, let the courts go. And then once the courts are done, then we can reevaluate and see where we are with the development of these mines in northern Minnesota.
We hear from range legislators and others all the time on mining issues. We'll give the floor to a farmer from Ag Country to talk a bit about this as well.
Well, I think when I had first got elected about was it 5 years ago now, I came in and Representative Dave Livslegard, he and I were talking, and he represents a big portion of his area is mining, and he said I know you're from farming, that's your background, that's kind of what our area, the 11B, that's agriculture is pretty strong there, and he said at the end of the day, he goes, if it comes out of the ground, either from farming or from mining, to get what we have, and and that produces so much of what, and I think it's an important part. Mining is crucial for whether it's the minerals that make our phones to I've got a GPS in the tractor that self drives, and so you just push a button on the end of the field. You push a button and it turns around. Well, all of that is a requirement of mining. And it's crucial. And I think we've done a great job in the United States having quite stringent regulations and doing it properly. And I think as best we can, we need to be doing it here.
Great. So next question up is on, and I believe we talked about this issue days before you voted on it, and it is the adult use of cannabis or marijuana.
It took this long to get here. I figured that was the first question.
I was just trying to soften you guys up. And so cannabis legalization. Now, both of you had some concerns going in. Representative Skraba, you were on the fence. Representative Nelson, you were pretty sure you were going to vote no. You both ended up voting no at this point. But the bill did pass, both out of the House and the Senate. So it looks like there's some potential for a final agreement in place. What are your thoughts on it thus far? What changes do you think need to be done, if any, to gain your approval on its way back after there's compromise between the House and the Senate? Representative Nelson, we'll let you go first.
Well, I don't know how much difference is between the House and Senate versions. I know that there's some differences there, and I think still, one of the things that I really, and I've been hearing from our law enforcement community, that's probably has some of the most concern about it, and whether it's founded or not, I know one of their big concerns is that there's not really a roadside test. If they take a test of somebody, a sample, it's going to show it's in your system, but where is the level of inhibition or whatever? And I know that that's a concern. At the same time, I know that there's people out, today, illicitly using and driving around operating equipment, and I know it's not right. They probably know it's not right, but at the same time, I think we need to get to I think we need to have some more testing available, some standards. If you're driving under the influence of alcohol, it's 0.08 is the level of intoxication. At what point, is it so many bags of Cheetos that you eat that the level of how high you are? I don't know, but I think there's got to be a test of some sort to be able to quantify. And I think that's one of the issue that's difficult to really quantify right now.
Representative Skraba, I know that most of your concerns last time centered around the hemp industry, and you wanted to see some relief or some changes in the bill there. Your thoughts on this legislation as it stands right now?
So I talked with Representative Stevenson before the vote.
And he's the chief author of the legislation.
Yes, Zach from the metro area. And he's done a great job of shepherding it through. There's really no stone unturned. I think every question he's tried to answer, if he hasn't already. And I told him my concern, and I talked to him on the floor about it publicly, because I wanted people to understand that, I come from being a mayor, and sometimes we like to have control over what goes on in our communities. And this bill doesn't give any community any opportunity to deny it anywhere, at any point. And it's kind of like, hey, wait a minute. Colorado passed it. The city of Colorado Springs banned it because they have the military there, and they said, we just don't want it around the military. Can you do that? Fine. It's Colorado, and you can't buy pot in Colorado Springs. So it's like, well, maybe there's communities up here that don't want it. And I told Zach, Representative Stevenson, I said, really, you get that. There's really not much more that I think you've done a good job of following through on everything. so I'm hoping it comes from, and Representative West is voted for it from us, and he's on the conference committee.
And he was one of 2 Republicans to support the bill.
Yes, and Representative Fidela, the other one. So I was really close, and I said, if you guys can get me some parity on that issue. The hemp farmers, hopefully the Senate worked through that. They were going to try to do it. I've not seen the mix of the two. A friend of mine did send me some snapshots of the chatter on the internet about, the day that I did that vote, I wore a tie that had the Tasmanian devil on there, because I really wasn't sure how I was going to vote that day. I truly was like, I don't know where I'm going to go on this, because, and the more I heard and the more that I was, and when I talked to Representative Stevenson, it's here. It's here already. Communities have an opportunity to, like some of the folks on the internet were talking, Grand Marais, they would embrace this. It's their art community, and that's their niche, and that, why would I deny them that? It's not. What I want Grand Marais is I want Grand Marais to be able to vote on it, saying, yes, we want it here, and we're going to regulate it, the way the state gives us the right to regulate it. That, to me, is what I wanted to see. And Representative Stevenson said, I can't do that. He wants it everywhere. But if anything changes in that, I'll probably vote for it then. I mean, I'm not opposed to it philosophically. So,
Well, you talk about the Tasmanian devil. Another issue that's been spinning around the Capitol for a number of years is sports betting. And it's certainly gotten some life and legs. There are some hearings on bills to legalize sports betting in Minnesota. In my opinion, doesn't look like it's going to cross the finish line this year, but it looks like there's certainly been some movement in the past couple of weeks. Yep. Representative Skraba, your thoughts on sports betting in Minnesota?
Well, it's an opportunity. Right now, the e-tabs are hot and heavy on everybody's. That's part of the issue. The legislature wants to limit how the games are played. We've had a break from the way they used to be during your term. Were you there when you helped get that stadium bill through?
No.
No? Okay, sorry. So someone was there, and anyway, what happened is that stadium bill was built on the pull tabs and the e-tabs, and they let them go out into the public, and we were using them. I'm on a snowmobile club, and it's helped us immensely. And now the legislature and the tax bill has something saying you can't play those games like that anymore. You have to, you can't just hit a button and then all 4 open, and then all 4 open. You see if you're a winner, you have to hit the button and then hit all 4, to get them open. And it's like, hey, that's going to cost money. We're going to lose sales. We're going to take a hit. In order to negotiate with the tribal councils or the tribes, if sports betting is imminent, if that is what is going to happen, we can use this as a negotiating tool. Let's work together so everyone gets something out of this, the public. These charities that could be hurt with the way the tax bill is written now, that's who we are in our communities. That's the Little League, that's the Legion, that's the Blue Line clubs. These are folks that use that money, the gambling money, the pull tab money, for helping our community. It's really a great way to raise funds for our communities. And if that gets cut, then we have to negotiate a way to get it. And if that means getting the sports betting on, again, I'm a negotiator. I'm willing to sit down with that. I'm not a hardline anti gambling person. I know there's people in our party that just don't want it, period. They just don't want to be around it. They think it's not good for our communities. It's around us now. It always has been. It's just if you legalize it, then you can tax it.
Representative Nelson, your thoughts on sports gambling, that expansion?
Well, I think a big part of it is we're losing some revenue to out. I think all the states around us allow it, and it's happening. I know there's people that go to Iowa, over to Wisconsin, and they're betting. And it's the same platforms that would be legalized here. So that revenue could be spent in here in our state, and I think an agreement needs to happen. I think it's really right now it's between the tribes, and I think the wedge issue is these e-pull tabs. I think there is a wedge issue there, and really trying to get that balanced out. And what does that look like to get this crossed, and I don't think it really has been a priority this session to get it passed. So I don't know if next year, if that'll be something that's worked on. For me, I've had other. It's not my area of expertise, so it's not something that I've worked on. I'm really neutral on the thought. I don't really care one way or another whether it passes, because I think, for the most part, it's a form of gambling that I see as pretty safe, because you can't, from the time you place a bet till the time it happens, what I've read about it, you've got to play a game in the middle, baseball or basketball, whatever. So it's something that, studies show that it's not a real highly, I suppose it can be addictive, but it's not something that you could lose everything really quickly, as a habitual thing. But that's again, I probably just showed how much I don't know about it with my answer. But it's something that it's not. I don't think it's likely to happen this session.
Okay. Caller from Duluth. Very frustrated, is saying that the governor promised a certain level of money being returned to taxpayers in rebate checks.
Yeah.
This year, I believe his proposal was up to $2,000 per individual, and right now the discussion is a lot less, and it seems like the rebate checks proposals are somewhere around $275 to $550, and this is using that one-time money of the surplus. Why the decrease? Why do you guys see that being the case? It received actually a fairly lukewarm reception from both Democrats and Republicans across the board. Maybe you individually have some thoughts on this, but why didn't the rebate checks that Governor Walz proposed really strike with Democrats or most Republicans? Representative Nelson, we'll start with you.
I think it was back probably during the campaign, almost a year ago. Governor Walz had said was going to release the Walz checks, and probably a little bit similar to the Jesse checks that were, almost 25 years ago now. And, it was a thing of, I think to a lot of people it looked gimmicky. And I think part of it was the GOP at that time was really looking at hopeful November turning out different than it did. And I think if had been the GOP been in control, I think or the House and Senate anyway, I think there'd have been more emphasis on tax rebates, and really tax cuts that way. And so some of that, say basically the same dollar amount would have been returned in tax rebates and tax cuts, probably more in cuts. And instead, now we're at a point where it's the Democrats control the trifecta, the House, Senate, and Governor, and their priorities are in such a way that what's left to return to as in a rebate form is about $275 per couple or per individual, $550 per couple, and then I think there's a cap on that, or an income cap, and I don't know if that's 125,000 is the income cap that would be eligible for getting that. So a majority of Minnesotans would be able to get a refund, but again, not the $2,000 that was kind of thrown around and somewhat promised almost a year ago now.
Representative Skraba, your thoughts on rebates?
What defies all logic is the fact that we have a surplus. We're going to raise taxes this year, but that's with our budget we have right now, and they're going to give money back, and it's kind of like, wait a minute, why are you raising taxes and you're giving money back? I don't understand. I don't like when they call it the Walz checks, because that means it's his money to give out, and it's not. And when you say they're going to put a cap on who gets the money, well, the people that paid more into it than anyone aren't going to get any back, and everyone that doesn't pay in is going to get money back. And it's kind of like, where are we going with this? I think if the Democrats were serious about this in the beginning, this would have been discussed. But right now, again, not that I don't care, but I just think what it is just a ploy, trying to get votes, saying, I promise you this, I'll give you something. But if you did, why'd you raise taxes on everything else? I mean, could we take our $275 and buy down the fishing and hunting licenses instead? Can you do that? But instead, we're not. Those are scheduled to go up. He has it in his budget for that, and it's like, I don't know. It's just a mess right now for me. I'm trying to figure out the logic, what's going on, and in this next week, we're going to see what comes out from tax conference committee, from environment, from education, and I'm kind of shocked the school teacher hasn't asked the question yet, about what's going on with the school, because I mean those dollars that are trying to find their way into our classrooms for our kids. I remember the Jesse checks, and I remember when they came out, everyone thought it was, oh, this is really cool. And then after, people were like, why didn't they use this money for other things, for education, for roads, for bridges? Why did they give it back to us? So again, $275. For some people, it's a lot of money. The people that I heard from are like, where's my $2,000? My fuel oil went up and my gas prices went up this year. It sure would have been nice to help me this winter. Again, ask the trifecta, because they're the ones in charge right now doing whatever they're doing.
Now, some would say, just to equate this thing, we have two Republicans on right now, so I feel like I have to bring in the other side of the argument so you guys can debate the other side of the argument as well. Some would say that the rebate checks wouldn't go to education funding because they're using the portion of the surplus which is one time, and that's really legislative speak for, and the way we've explained it on the show before is the budget surplus is broken down to some one-time money and some ongoing money. And the ongoing money is like the paycheck you receive. You're going to get that every 2 weeks. The one-time money is more like a bonus you got that you can't rely on moving forward. So some would argue that the reason why you wouldn't put the money towards buying down fishing licenses or going to education is because the money goes away, because it's only here for this one specific moment. You can't promise it 2 years from now. And so, Representative Skraba, are you proposing taking that one-time money and spending it on ongoing programming, which would then put us into a deficit potentially, or not be able to fulfill that promise?
I think we kind of discussed it last time I was here. There's roughly $5 million every 2 years that's coming in, or $2.5 million every year coming in. Billion. Yeah. Sorry, thank you. Billion.
What's a million and billion between friends?
Well,
right
when you're
now?
when you're on a bonding committee, it's just every day is $137 million asked. You're just numb. So, but
so there's an ongoing $5 billion surplus.
Yes, that we keep getting, and yet, and again, the 12.5. If you're going to give money from the 12.5, go ahead. But they're using that 12.5, and this is something I want to take when I go down this week tomorrow. I want to find out exactly how the Democrats have the 12.5 spent and the 5 spent.
So the one-time money.
Yeah,
and
where are they spending that exactly? Where are they spending it? Because it's already gone, it's spent, and it's like it would be interesting to see. So if they are using that money to buy down taxes or something in the future for something, the one time, maybe that's the rebate check that you would have gotten instead of having to pay more next year. But I don't know what they're doing with it. I don't know if you're familiar with how they do it. I'm not.
Anything else on the tax issue?
So, I don't know a whole lot there on on the one-time funding. I know that one of the bills that we passed, or that the House passed this week, was the Paid Family Leave Act, and that's getting. I don't remember what the seed money on that was. Is it 60? Or was it 670 million, or was it more than that?
No, it was more than that.
It was, but anyway, it's to really kind of upfill that front, upfill that account up front, and with that, I know that was one-time money going into there, but in the end, it's a payroll tax on everybody in the state, and so that is one area that one-time funding is being used. To upfront fill an account, and then ongoing from there will be a payroll tax that gets enacted. So it's upfront money or surplus money spent plus tacking on ongoing.
So this viewer that's wanting to know about the rebate checks had one more question about property tax relief. And so the state doesn't necessarily play a direct role at times in property taxes. That is, your cities, your counties, your school districts really levy that. But where the state does play a role is on aid to local governments, either on the county or the city level. And so I do know there was an increase in that bill, which could potentially impact local property taxes, but that's a local decision for those local elected officials to make. Your thoughts on aid coming back to communities, and will that impact property taxes in one way, shape, or form? Representative Nelson, we'll start with you this time.
Yeah, I think the aid is helpful and important for our to our communities. One of the downsides with property taxes, from the time they're figured and calculated, and the aid coming in, it takes a while until it actually really ends, almost 2 years by the time it ends up really showing up and making meaningful impact on our property taxes. I think something that's quicker, is some of the rebate programs that Department of Revenue can have for, whether it's a disabled veteran or, there's some elderly programs that, if you have lived in your home for a certain amount of time, or if the property increased by a certain amount of value over a certain time period. There's some things there that I think probably need to be increased. Just inflation on property, especially our rural properties have really increased in the last two years or so, and that's I think we probably need to equally fund the rebate that's available for some of the elderly, especially.
Former mayor, local government aid, county aid, importance of that, and will that impact property taxes?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, that's the whole idea of we've survived on LG, local government aid, and county aid. The more that we get there, the less we as elected officials have to raise local property taxes. So but again, it comes to fiscal restraint per city council, per township, per county board. Just because you get more doesn't mean you should spend more. Sometimes you have to wait for everything to catch up and not spend it, and let, if you haven't funded inflation, or if you haven't kept up on some of your raising your fees in your community, then you use that to offset it for a while, but you still have to keep raising those fees to keep everything going. But I totally, I'm hoping that stays in there, the local government aid and the county aid. Can we, I don't know. I was trying to find, there's a graph I just saw about property taxes, about how much the valuation of the property went up, and then the property taxes themselves. And we were taught all the time the two aren't related. They're totally not related, but yet they always come related. Somehow they start to find each other in the dark, and I think in the next 2 years, if our economy starts to go really south, I think the taxes are going to freeze, or you're not going to see, I think you can see everyone saying, hey, that's enough. Let's just stop and just live with what we have and learn how to do it and do what they do. I was trying to think of some of the studies I read this morning about it, and there's so many different opinions out there. Like one of the issues was people were criticizing nonprofits getting all the money. Well, in the truest sense, and if I can use the Northland as an example, what happens is the Northland Foundation has a great opportunity to take the state monies and make sure they get out to the public, which I really want to see. I want to see people get tax breaks. I want to see people. And when you give it to a government to do it, it always gets sucked up in the administration somewhere, and the people get less. So I'm hoping if we give some of this tax money to nonprofits, the nonprofits will reach more of the people in instantly. And whether or not that happens, I'm kind of watching out what's going to happen now, because something has to change the way we're doing business, and because I think there's a certain part of the population that needs tax relief, and how they get it may not be directly a check, say here. Maybe it's a service that they can get that they don't have to pay money for.
So rounding it back to
Yeah.
property taxes,
Yes.
though, one more time, is there anything the state can do on this? I know at times there have been some thoughts around the state coming in and mandating a freeze on levies and a freeze, either with
Yep.
money coming with it
Yep.
or superseding that local control, which I know gives some elected state legislators heartburn of those are local decisions that need to be made. And so, the viewers are always coming in about property taxes and what can the legislature at the state level do? Representative Nelson, freezing property taxes, mandating certain levy increases. What are your thoughts on that?
I think, on the surface, it sounds good. Freeze the taxes and things like that. But, at the same time, I think when that happens, when you freeze a tax, like you had said, there's usually has to be money from the state that follows it up. And when that happens, the money from the state came in as a tax from somewhere. The state doesn't just have money. And so you're redistributing from somewhere. So I think it's, I know that there's a lot of municipalities, townships and stuff that they kind of have an unwritten rule that we're not going to increase the levy by more than a certain percentage. And one of the challenges of, this last year, when you look at what wages have done, I'm hearing from, some people that plow the roads for the county. Well, if they went and they worked for a private contractor instead of, the county highway, they could have a pretty substantial wage increase. They might give up some benefits, but and that used to be a better paying job working for the county than the local contractor. Well, now it's they can earn better the local contractor. So it really becomes a give and take. And so if you put a cap on, on say your road and bridge fund, on the levy of it, well, now you also can't pay the guy plowing the snow. You can't pay him more, and wages have to keep up with the cost of the other employment options. So it is a challenge to put a cap on, but I do definitely sympathize and hear with those that are complaining about property taxes. I pay them myself, and they've increased, and I don't like it. But at the same time, we've got to. I think it's an area that we see what it does locally, because it's funding our roads, it's funding our schools, it's funding our our town, our townships, whatever. And I think that's the form of government that is really the most responsive to what's going on.
Representative Skraba, you spoke earlier in this hour about the desire for local control. Mm-hmm. Your thoughts on the state coming in and talking about freezing property taxes or setting levy limits?
I lived through the Plenty. They did that during the Plenty administration. They came in and tried to do all those things, and you have to learn to do more with less. And it wasn't, not that city government should be fun, but it was not fun. It wasn't even fun going to meetings, trying to figure out, because basically it comes down to what Representative Nelson said. What are you going to cut to pay for this? Because that's what's going to happen. The state's not going to come in with a pot of gold and say, okay, we're going to freeze you, but here's some money to make sure it goes okay. It's like, we're freezing you because there's no money in the system, and we need to check and balance the system. And when those freezes come, and will they come? I'm not there. That's those three guys that the governor can talk to, the auditor, the assessor, and those guys. They'll tell you what's going on in long range planning, the demographics guys, people. And I think if we start freezing taxes to hold the property taxes, if we do that, I had just the opposite conversation with state employees. Our plow truck drivers, the guys that plow snow, $27.50 an hour, that's what they make. The guy moving dirt down the street for a union shop is, again, $35 to $39. The difference is the guy at the state has got a job the whole time. He's not getting cut off. He's always going to have work, or gal, everyone. That's the way it's going to be. When you work in a private industry, you might not have work next week, and that's just the way it is. So you give up things for what you have. But right now, they're so far out of whack. There's people, that are in their late 50s saying, you know what, I think it's time to go somewhere else. And then when we lose that, there's nothing behind. There's nothing to fill those voids. So if you start talking freezing taxes and you start if we were to do something like that, I would ask, if we did that, if we could get those regional managers, like Dwayne Hill, the districts, come in and tell us our workforce, what's happening, and before we start making decisions like that, because it could have a bigger impact than we think.
And I want to talk about workforce in our limited amount of time, but I want to get to this question from a viewer earlier on, Representative Skraba, directly to you. Another caller from Hibbing, or maybe the same one, who knows, wondering if the Minnesota DNR has recommended that Cleveland Cliffs receive the state iron ore leases near Nashwauk. These are leases that have been held up for a long time. And is it a foregone conclusion that Cliffs will receive those leases? Representative Skraba, to you, and then the caller asked, do you think this is a good decision?
Tentatively, right now, yes. The governor said we're going to award them to Cliffs. It has to go through the council, and when the council, generally it's the auditor, the
Secretary of State,
and the governor, the lieutenant governor. And it sounds like it's going to happen, and I think it's good. And the reason I say it's good is there's 750, almost 800 jobs that Cleveland Cliffs has in that area. If it went to someone else, those jobs might not be there anymore. They would phase out. So I think it's good that we keep those jobs healthy. Cliffs is someone that they know what they're doing. We can, there's a reasonable amount of trust. So I'm hoping that stays, that it goes.
Great. Thank you, and thanks for the callers for calling in. I want to tackle workforce. We don't have a lot of time left, and this is a big wheeling topic, and I know both of you sit on committees that impact this. Representative Nelson, we're going to start with you. Before, Governor Rudy Perpich, governor from the Iron Range, always talked about jobs, jobs, jobs. Well, when you look at the demographic changes and you talk to small businesses, large businesses, it's really about people, people, people. Now, we don't have the people to fill the jobs that are currently here today. And so there are a lot of barriers around workforce. And it's not just an issue in northeastern Minnesota, it's around the country as well. Are we addressing those issues at the state level well enough, or are there other things we can be doing to help with the barriers for businesses to find workers?
I think there's a lot of areas that we are addressing them. I think one area that we're, kind of dropping the ball on a little bit is in our schools, in our secondary schools. And with what's happening, some of the mandates that are coming down with the classes that are being required, I'm hearing some of the schools are maybe limiting their options on some of the elective classes, and so maybe that's a shop class or things like that. And I think it's unfortunate because we're not exposing kids to some of the areas that may be out there. Maybe they have an interest in them, or maybe they take the class and find out that they don't want to work in an area. And in the workforce committee, one of the statistics I'd heard early on in the committee was that if every job in Minnesota was filled right now, we'd still have 140,000 open jobs. And so there's a lack of people here. And part of it's our family sizes are smaller. It's been trending smaller. There's a lot of things that's made up for it. And this was something that had always been coming. It was on the horizon. 3 years ago when COVID-19, when that hit our shores, and it really accelerated that. There were people that took early retirements. Maybe they're doing some gig work. Taking a different lifestyle, just seeing that, how life was affected. And so that's affected our workforce and everything. And I think, while I think there's areas that are being addressed, I think we could do a little bit more to really help our workforce be engaged and deciding on where they want to work in the future.
We only have a minute left. Representative Nelson talked about some of the long term, but we know there are businesses today in our region who can't find workers today. And so looking at the education piece, I'm sure is important, but what today can the state do to help these businesses looking for workers?
If we can go out and get more foreign workers, like get work visas and things like that, let's do it. I'm not opposed. If we can get foreign workers come in, you want to work towards your citizenship, let's get you on board. Let's get you filling some of these positions. I'm all for it. Let's sit down and work. Workforce housing only got $40 million. $300 million would have been better so that we can house these people. It's one of our issues. And just came from school up in Indus. They have a program in the high school that teaches kids when they graduate from high school, they have a line cook. They can go work right away. They have it. It's a magnet school. I think we need to really look at that and get these people working instead of trying to figure out what they want to do with their life. Let's just get them working right away. And then let them think what they want to do with their life.
Well, it sounds like there's a lot that can be done on the state, and that's a federal issue as well, which thankfully is out of all of your guys' pay grade, right? All right. Well, we are out of time, and I'd like to thank Representative Roger Skraba and Representative Nathan Nelson for joining us today. I'd also like to thank my son Sam, who's sitting in the green room and was very patient for this full hour. Join me again next Sunday for our final Minnesota legislative report of the season, when we welcome more lawmakers from northern Minnesota with an update from the state capitol. For the team at PBS North, I'm Tony Sertich. Have a great evening.